show you real quick how I made the buttons for the mod. Basically, I used a piece of Lexan that's .093 thickness. I started by cutting just a little square and using the Dremel with a little cutting bit on it. You just want to round it off. Now that you have a rough shape of a circle, you can remove this, or the way I do it anyway, and then put a little sanding bit on, and then you can pretty much round the edges. And go ahead and peel off the protective covers on each side. And once you got a decent round piece, I kept it about this size to that way I can hold it. The original button has a little lip on the bottom, and you're gonna want to try to mimic this. That way the button don't fall through the hole, because that pretty much kind of keeps it locked in place. So now you want to take your Dremel and just slowly go around it, making a groove, or making the lip. Now once you got a little rough shape and you have the lip, now you can focus on getting it down to about the size of the original button. I keep dropping the damn thing. Alright, I found it. Now when you do have the lip about the same, you can go ahead and start to get that main centerpiece, the main centerpiece that starts to show. You can go ahead and start getting it down to size. Just take your time. Don't go all the way, down to the size. You want to use the Dremel just to get it almost there, and then once you get it close, you can use what I use is a metal fingernail file. You can use a metal one, or you can use the cheap ones too, but the metal one's a little more rigid. And basically, with a lot of time and patience and paying attention, you can slowly get it down to where it needs to be, and hopefully end up with a perfect or close to perfect circle. That way it looks good in the Vita. Alright, here we are now. Now that we have the Vita tore down, if you need help with this, there is a guide on the site how to disassemble and tear down the Vita to the front panel, which is pretty much what I have it down to. You can see how I've run the LED from the top down the side. Just wanted to point out that I decided to put the LED in the middle between the two volume buttons. That way when you have the buttons in, it'll light them up evenly, since it'll be in between them. And I figure that would be better on power, and also would look better, in my opinion, than two separate LEDs shining through. Basically, you're going to need I had to, and I mean, you can do it however you like, but I found the best way was I had to run it inside the trigger, which there is a structural vein right there that I had to notch out. That way the wires will lay flat. That way when you put the motherboard back down, it won't interfere with the wire being there. And I'll continue to run it down, and right here you will need to angle or make sure the angle is right, because there is a chip on the motherboard that kind of falls right in here, so you want to make sure that the angle on this wire is over far enough to clear that chip when you put the motherboard back in. And I have mine about where it needs to be, so you know everything's fine on my end, but just that's something you want to watch. As I ran it down, I ran it between the two screw holes that connect the motherboard and the daughter board. I did have to notch out another little notch there from the structural vane, as well as one about here and about here. That way the wires will lay flat and it won't interfere with either of the boards, you know, making it hard to screw it back together. And as you can see, I had to notch out the area for the LED between the volume buttons. I'm going to get this side bolted back down, and oh yeah, I also wanted to point out that the ground wire for the LED will come up right there at the bracket that connects the two boards. That's going to be the ground, and you can actually sandwich the ground between the bracket and either the motherboard or the daughter board, either one, it doesn't really matter. But that will be the ground for the LED, and it's just a good solid ground, and I figure that's a good place to stop it at, and you know, connect it there, and then you can just run the power wire down by itself, and that way it'll be a little easier for you to work with. And but anyway, I'm gonna cut it here, and I'll pick it back up when I get the motherboard and daughter board in, kind of show you. Alright, now that I have the motherboard and the daughter board in, I'd just like to show you how the wire is ran. You can't really see it, but it's actually between there. The ground is grounded here. It's actually just the wire is just stripped and is sandwiched between that bracket and the board to ground out the LED up top. And the power, as you can see, is run down, and it comes up near the bottom through the gap between the boards, and it'll run up and connect there, which will give it the power it needs. I'm going to move on to the other side, and we'll pick back up from there. Alright, I got the LED in over on the what would be the power button. If you look closely, I actually had to drill a hole, or if you can see rather, I had to drill a hole in the trigger, or where the trigger mounts it, for the clip that holds it down. And basically when you do that, it will allow you to run the LED right up beside the power button, as you can see. Kind of like, and it's about the same distance, I guess, as having the one in the center of the two buttons, your left, or your up and down on the volume. That way the one in the center will give it even, you know, spread the brightness evenly. So having the LED over here to the side, it will pretty much mimic the same thing because of the distance. So they should all light up about the same. Now, as I ran it down on the inside of that trigger mounting piece for the clip, down and around the screw hole for the daughter board bracket and daughter board. And as you can see, I have the negative wire coming up, because that will actually be sandwiched between the bracket and the daughter board, much like I did over here, where ground is for that LED. So that's where you want to ground at. It'll just be easier, so you don't have to run 2 wires all the way down or whatever. Then as you can see, I just ran on this side. It's a lot easier than the other side. You don't really have to cut out anything. You can just kind of run it down. Just make sure that your daughter board ground on the screen is clear enough for it to ground when you bolt the daughter board down, and just run it straight down. And down here I did have to cut right there. I just had to cut a notch out of the structural vein for the wire to lay in there. That way when you put the board on, the wire will not interfere with it, and then you can just run the wire out the bottom of the board up to the soldering point. Alright, this is the final look at the wiring after I got it all done, ready to put the back on. I just wanted to point out that you need to try your best to stay, or to wrap the wire inside that guide pin on each side. Otherwise the case or the back housing will actually interfere if you try to run it in the groove, which I tried to do earlier and found out that it actually interfered with the case or the back housing. Basically the back housing has little grooves under the speaker on each side. They're in there from, just they're made that way. Basically you want to try to line them wires up the best you can to fall in them grooves. Now the grooves are pretty wide, so they're not too hard to get it in there. I mean, as long as you kind of just look at how you got your wire in relation to the speaker hookups, it should fall. I did have to trim out below the speaker right at the connector. That way the wire would lay in there as well. And that's about the only place I needed to trim. But that shouldn't interfere with anything, and you should be able to put it back together no problem. Just make sure you watch it as you do it. Alright, here we go. All finished. Buttons are in. LEDs are in. Power's on. They'll blink a couple times. I guess it doesn't quite send full power until it starts up for whatever reason, which is kind of cool because you ain't got to worry about them being on when it's in standby or anything. But there they are. All nice and pretty like. Volume works. It's all good in the hood. I did notice when you're like going to applications, I guess because of the fact that it cuts off I guess power between switching applications, they'll blink, but other than that, it's a good safe way to get power through the speakers. You ain't really got to worry about shorting nothing out. Like I said, I'm completely open to anybody that finds a better power source that cuts on and off with the Vita. I plan on kind of doing another kind of mod that has something to do with that, but I'll get to it. But that's it. Hope you guys like it. I guess we'll shut it off. And it goes off. Awesome. Awesome, dudes.